so that Allah can bless us. Then we go straight to the press conference. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Keba Kamara, press assistant. As you can see, we are launching the blueprint today, and I don't have much to do. Is to tell you thank you so much for coming, because I just communicated with you guys this morning that you are needed 2 o'clock today, and you made yourself available. We are very, very humble. Welcome to Kersering, Essa's house. Welcome to Sobe Yakunda, and without much ado, Essa himself is around, and he's ready to tell you what's in the blueprint. Essa, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Cheva, and thank you all for coming and for honoring this invitation at a very short notice. We are very grateful for your presence here today. I had announced at the Cape Fatu program a couple of days ago that we would launch our manifesto today. Ours is called the Blueprint. It is a manifesto for Team Essa Mbaye Faal for President. Why do we call it a blueprint? For us, it is the blueprint to ensure a turnaround to economic development and prosperity for the Gambian people. In presenting this, in launching this manifesto, I would want to crave your indulgence to read out a statement that I have written for the Gambian people. Fellow Gambians, I begin by giving all praise and glory to the Almighty God for his many mercies. I am running for president for our beloved Gambia because our country is standing at a crossroads and regressing, while our people continue to suffer the indignities of poverty. The cost of living is skyrocketing out of reach of many of our citizens, including the working poor. And there are no effective mechanisms in place to prevent unreasonable price hikes. The ordinary people are at the mercy of predatory businesses whose primary interest is to make profits, while the government continues to impose punitive taxes that further impoverish our people. The sick and vulnerable are uncared for, educational institutions are starved of resources, frontline workers are paid unlivable wages, the youths are unemployed, and I dare say even unemployable, and women and girls continue to be subjected to outdated cultural biases that relegate them to second-class citizens. Why are we in this situation? And what is stopping us from achieving prosperity for our people? It is not the absence of sound policies. Rather, it is the failure of leadership and an outdated political system which prefers surnames, places of residence, and political patronage over competence, professionalism, and integrity. The fixation on these parochial values has resulted in terrible national choices that held back our country's development. In the Gambia, politics and leadership have for too long been left in the hands of ineffectual and incompetent leaderships, whilst our best and brightest sons and daughters take international jobs. and run away to build new countries for all people, both in times of peace and in the aftermath of conflicts. Gambians are nation builders, whether in East Timor, Liberia, Sudan, or Nigeria. Before my father died in 2020, he told me that the country is underdeveloped because people like me ran away from direct participation in the governance of our country, leaving less capable people to govern the country poorly for 56 years. We were trapped in our own self-interest, and in the process failed to take seriously our patriotic duties to our country beyond our basic obligations. My father's incisive observation piqued my conscience, and which in turn transformed my life. It got me rethinking my situation and that of our country more seriously than ever before. That is why I accepted to be the lead counsel of the TRRC and made a personal commitment to go above and beyond the call of duty to deliver on the expectations of the Gambian. If elected, I'll bring to the presidency the same drive and determination to ensure peace, progress, and prosperity for the Gambian people in our lifetime. In order to achieve success and turn around our beloved country, I am inviting our country's best and brightest citizens, competent and qualified Gambians at home and in the diaspora, experienced Gambians of my generation, to step up to the plate to save our country and end the abdication. I ask all Gambians to join me in this journey to a new Gambia. That is the message that I deliver to the nation. And now I turn to the issue at hand. What is this blueprint all about? What is our blueprint for a national turnaround? We say, for a positive transformation of our beloved country, we need competent heads, able hands, appropriate tools, an abundance of result-oriented Gambians supported by a leadership with ideas to turn the country around to prosperity for all. This diligent approach will enable us to adeptly implement tried and tested best practices, as well as new and appropriate innovative solutions. The Gambia is not in need of yet another long and convoluted theoretical policy document. We have many of these, and we've had a lot more in the past. Our country is in need of an action plan capable of implementation. We call it a blueprint for development. Team Essa Mbaye Faal offers the Gambia a practical action plan for national turnaround. In its honesty, simplicity, and ambition, every Gambian can play a practical role in our action plan for national turnaround, while equally delivering a framework by which to hold to account the presidency of Essa Mbaye Faal. What is the national turnaround we need and want? We want a national turnaround whereby the talents, skills, diligence, commitment, and also the kindness that make individual Gambians highly valued and respected across the world, to define us as a small country with big excellence. At the present moment, they called us Gambians, small country, big noise. But we want to be known as small country with big excellence. This turnaround will not be the task of President Essa Mbaye Faal or Team Essa Mbaye Faal alone. It will be the vocation, and it will represent the values and aspirations of every Gambian. We will call upon the righteous and competent elders and seniors at home and in the diaspora to mentor and nurture the enthusiastic and ambitious youth of this country, the Gambia, for us to achieve excellence as a small nation of sisters and brothers, kith and kin, compatriots and friends. The destiny of the Gambia is not one of poverty, mediocrity, and hopelessness. We say no. The promise of the Essa Mbaye Faal's presidency is one of honest and committed Gambian, educated and enlightened youth, abundance of opportunities, and support for women and youth, inclusive, responsible, and sustainable development for all to fulfill our long-held national aspirations of progress, peace, and prosperity. And what would we commit? We promise that we would double GDP per capita in 10 years. We can do it. You know what? Senegal is already doubling our GDP. Ours at 2020 is $787 per capita. Senegal is $1,487. If we perform as well as Senegal, we can double our GDP. And the promise is to do it in 10 years. And if we all work hard and diligently, we should be able to do it in less time. We want to double youth employment in 5 years. Currently, it stands at very low level. We have, I think, 19% youth employment. We want to ensure meritocracy and social mobility for all Gambians. What do I mean by for social mobility? It means that people should be able to move up the ladder. People should be able to do better for themselves. We also promise an inclusive, responsible, and social development. Why inclusive social development? We want to ensure that nobody or no people is left behind. There should not be development for the Sarabule to the exclusion of the Wolof. There should not be development for the Manjago to the exclusion of the Madikas. All of us should be included in the development of the country. And I do not mean anything when I give an example. I just needed to give an example. No offense to those groups that have been mentioned. And Essa Mbaye Faal presidency committed to a turnaround away from theft, corruption, and waste. Everybody knows about the massive waste that is happening in this country. There are a lot of big vehicles that are plying the roads, running after private business or private interest, and not the public interest. That is massive waste. There are a lot of drugs that are escaping the hospital into private pharmacies. That is theft and waste. And the list goes on. And we promise a turnaround from poverty, retrogression, and indignity. I mean, the indignity that people suffer from being paid unlivable wages is telling. And we have to turn around from that. We have to turn around from incompetence, indifference, and negligence. That is, in fact, one of the biggest reasons why we are where we are today. We have to turn around from degraded services, demoralized workers, and patronizing government. We have made a lot of noise about the low wages that are being paid to people in this country. And there was this promise that they would raise the salaries. Nothing has happened yet. We also have to turn around from the dysfunctional culture of begging and dependency on foreign aid and charity. I do say that a beggar culture is taking root in this country, and it is terrible. Why must we reduce our people to that? We should pay them salaries that are good enough for them to have a decent living, instead of paying them salaries that would just reduce them to the indignity of calling somebody abroad and begging them to pay school fees, or calling them to begging them to send you something for the bus or for transport. We have to turn away from all these. And like I said, the destiny of the Gambia is not one of poverty or mediocrity and hopelessness. There is a big promise of a better life, of a better Gambia in the future. And what are the values and standards we need for a national turnaround? How do we achieve this? Knowledge, ability, and finances alone are not enough for the national turnaround that the Gambia needs. We need to confront our failures and admit that a system change is imperative. This is why our action plan for national turnaround is based on three fundamental principles. One, addressing the challenges of our people, our institutions, and creating a motivated Gambia. These are lofty ideas. Addressing the challenges of our peoples and of our institutions, and creating a motivated Gambia. The Essa Mbaye Faal presidency, if we are fortunate to be elected, shall nurture a nation with the following core development characteristics. One, people with diligent and patriotic attitude as citizens and workers. This is a very important point. I emphasize the issue of patriotism. There is a massive deficit of patriotism in this country. And this is something that we must change. Two, institutions with appropriate and optimal structures, systems, and processes. This is very, very important because it highlights the importance of reform in all our services, public service, security services. And the third point is public sector and national motivation through fair rewards and robust disincentives. You know, people say that the Gambia is now the second worst place in the world to do business. And that is a terrible accolade. And if we have a public sector and national motivation through fair rewards and robust disincentives, that would help deal with the issue of the corruption that we face in this country. Without explicit development principles, values, well observed and well enforced standards of public life, we will continue to tinker on the edges of our problems of underdevelopment and inequality, whilst the masses live without fulfilling their God-given potential and barely surviving, afflicted by the indignities of poverty. And what will we do in our 100 days in office? The presidency of Essa Mbaye Faal will be ultra ambitious and hyperactive in its work and pursuit of inclusive, responsible, and sustainable development. The first 100 days in office will set the tone, pace, and work ethic for the presidency. We will listen to all political parties, stakeholders, and development partners on specific programs, projects, and activities. But we shall start by implementing a portfolio of activities to pave the way for the transformative national turnaround. The action plan or the action points in the first 100 days of an Essa Mbaye Faal presidency shall include, amongst other things, the priorities set out in the pages that are contained in the document. In the first 30 days of our government, if we are elected into office, shall lay the foundation for a new Gambia, anchored on the unbending principles and values of transparency, human rights, and the rule of law, or the rule according to law, and not the rule according to man. I therefore declare my commitment and promise to transition the country to a new democratic Gambia, where the law will be the queen of my government. I therefore promise that I intend to consolidate the gains made by the Gambian people in 2016 by doing the following amongst many other important initiatives. One is to expedite enactment of the long overdue anti-corruption bill. I don't know what is it called. It could be articles, but we will expedite this. We badly need an anti-corruption law in order to stem the bleeding. The Gambia is bleeding profusely. We have to stop the bleeding. Your money, our money, is bleeding into wrong hands. I don't know whether that forms part of the Dahili Sipa that we hear about, but definitely we need to stem the bleeding. And in an Essa Mbaye Faal presidency, we would ensure that an anti-corruption law is put in place expeditiously. The Gambia has spent $110 million in search of a new constitutional order. For those of you who are interested in constitutional law or the governance architecture of this country, you would know that we have put in place a commission to search for a new constitutional order, which runs all over the country and abroad in the diaspora, trying to identify the wishes and aspirations of the Gambian people as to how they should be governed. This crystallized into a draft constitution, which was submitted to Parliament for adoption. And they deliberately killed it. They killed it for political expediency. Its selfish personal reasons trumped the wishes of the Gambian people. And in the process, $110 million was thrown in the gutter. I say and I promise that in a government led by Essa Mbaye Faal, we would reinstate that constitution as it represents the values of the people. This is their statement as to how they wish to be governed. It has to be respected, it has to be honored. We would ensure a quick referendum for the adoption of that constitution. All of us do know that we have a pro-dictatorship constitution because it was the 1997 constitution is a constitution that organizes and strengthens a dictatorship. We say no to that constitution and we want a new one. And I promise that in the government led by Essa Mbaye Faal, we will deliver on that wish of the government. We should also expedite the enactment of the Elections Bill 2020. It is unfortunate that we are going to election in 2021 on a law that is based on a 1996 decree. I do not think that speaks well for this country. It also drives a big nail in the transition program of this country. Were we serious about it? It does not seem so. Post 2016, the Gambia embarked upon an extensive transitional justice program, which, amongst other things, would give rise to a report by the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, in which I do believe, I'm just guessing here now, that over $3 million has been spent on. But that too is being sacrificed at the altar of political expediency or at the altar of political compromises that promise to re-elect an incumbent. I dare say an unpopular incumbent. What a big shame this is. Because this promises to be the document that unravels the dirt of the past, reconcile the aggrieved with their aggressors, and put in place recommendations for a better organization of our society in the future. To jettison that to the dustbin is a big travesty and a big insult to the Gambian people. This should be a big issue in this election. It should separate the boys from the men. It should separate the brave from the cowards. It should also separate the enlightened from the uninformed or the clueless. I hope Gambians will take note. I promise to do the brave. I promise to do the right thing. I promise to comply with the law of this country. I promise to do justice by the downtrodden who were victimized. I promise to do what every Gambian would accept to be just. If they fail to promise that, do not vote for them. Here we are making that pledge for the Gambian people. So in that regard, I accept to implement the recommendations and findings of the TRRC. Since post the beginning of post 2016. We've been searching for a security sector reform. We thought that this country was wallowing in gross insecurity, that we had to import foreign troops into the country during peacetime. This is an aberration. I have worked at the United Nations. I have worked at the United Nations Security Council. Rarely would you see a peacekeeping operation in a time of peace. It is an aberration. It is, in fact, a contradiction in terms, but we have been subjected to that through make-believe or through unnecessary fear. And also the degradation of our own security forces by subjecting them to the humiliation of being sidelined for one's comfort. We promise that we will have an expeditious review of the findings of the Security Sector Reform Commission or Committee and implement them expeditiously. But also we would ensure an expeditious transfer of the security of this country to our own security forces. And that is absolutely important. In our first 30 days, we shall establish a prisons task force. Perhaps we should even expand this to mental institutions task force, which will undertake a comprehensive review of the conditions in these institutions with a view to improving them and alleviating the indignities and the suffering that the inmates of these places are subjected. Anybody who has entered Mile 2 prisons would know that these are the forgotten people in Gambia. They are forgotten in terms of their health conditions. They are forgotten in terms of their comprehensive review of this with a view to immediately taking steps that would alleviate the suffering of these people. We have seen the bluff in 2017. Ours would be concrete and practical steps. We would honor them through making steps to change things. And we would not disrespect them by just parading and taking photo opportunities. We promise to do what is right by these people. And the hospital, or they call it the hospice. It is a hospice because this is a place where people go to wait to die. I heard one of my teammates say in this hospice or hospital, Lohobudama, paracetamol. Headache, paracetamol. Diarrhea, paracetamol. Heart problem, paracetamol. I think we should put an end to this nonsense. We have to treat Gambian life seriously. We would establish a hospital task force to undertake a comprehensive review of the state of the hospitals, clinics, and the health facilities up and down the country. It is in a terrible mess. We have to fix that mess. I would rather spend $1 billion on rehabilitating hospitals instead of political campaigns. This is a big travesty to the Gambian. And then we would start the fight against the endemic corruption of this country. Corruption has a disproportionate impact on the poor and the vulnerable, increasing costs and reducing access to services, including health, education, and justice. I call corruption the biggest human rights violation that the Gambian people are suffering. Why do I say that? If the medicine in the revolving fund escape or fall through the cracks and find themselves into private pharmacies, if the hard-earned money from massive or crippling taxes of our poor and elderly find themselves to be depassed for senior officials, if the little money that the government has collected, that is to be used for the welfare of the Gambian people, is used to buy mansions in Florida, Miami, or in Dakar, it's a big violation of the rights of the Gambian people. Don't think that this is not happening. Yes, it is happening. And we have to bring an end to this because it violates the rights of the Gambian. Every Gambian is entitled to have the resources of this country used for the people and not who are serving in privileged positions. We will eliminate waste and ensure that Gambia is free of corruption and graft. Perhaps free of corruption and graft is a very tall ambition. Let us say we would significantly or drastically reduce this. And this is a goal long desired by the people. We will create not only a corruption-free public and not tolerate corruption. You know, in Africa we say, "Nenak bifanko taka fakal fala leke." Fi kusacha jutachul. We seek to end this through good education of our citizens. So we have key deliverables, what we promise to do to end this corruption. Of course, we would enact the anti-corruption law and establish an anti-corruption commission that would spearhead the fight against official corruption. We would pay the frontline workers and low-grade employees in the civil service livable wages, which will allow public servants to earn incomes that can provide a decent standard of living for their families. You know, the Bindans at home earn 3 times the salaries of police officers. That is a terrible situation. So don't be surprised if the police would take Nehal on the streets. We want to pay government workers, including the police and service providers, salaries that they can live on, salaries that would enable them to have a decent living, and not reduce them to the indignities of taking Nehal on the street. We want to enforce a zero-tolerance policy on corruption and government waste to mitigate the destructive effects of official graft and that holds back socioeconomic development. You know, somebody told me that if there is a conference abroad, it does not necessarily go to the rightful person. It goes to one of the most senior persons in the office because they chase after the padia. If it is a conference locally that pays an allowance, it goes to those at the second level. If it is one that gives only lunch, it goes to those who are at the third rung. If it doesn't pay any allowances, it doesn't give any lunch, nobody attends. What a terrible situation. So the importance or the substance of the subject is not significant. Rather, it is what is paid. We would change this. Our civil servants are too valuable for us. They are too important. We have to pay them enough to the extent that they will not be reduced to these indignities of chasing after per diem or allowances in conferences. I recall growing up, my father was able to take a government loan to build a house. And he was able to build 2 houses from government loans. The first house was at our family home in Banjul when I was a little kid. He paid that off over 20 years. He took another. To build our house where I grew up. And he paid also, he's not expected to be rich. You would struggle. But at least you are paid enough to be able to do these things. Now in Gambia, who can build a house from his or her salary? It's impossible. Even the masons earn more than the senior assistant secretaries in government. It is a shame. Pretty soon, the Bindans would earn more than senior government officers because already they earn 3 times the salaries of low-level police officers. We have to change this. And the only way we can change this is to ensure that people are paid enough for them to have a decent living. We will implement an effective, verifiable income and asset declaration policy for all public employees to guard against abuse of public office for personal gain. But this is tied to the principle of paying livable wages. If we pay you enough, if we pay you well, there is no reason why you should do nakasudu no. If you pay you enough, there is no reason why anyone should do otherwise. And we hope that with these measures, things would change. If they don't change, we would put in place certain enforcement mechanisms that would ensure justice for all wrongs done. Corruption will never be maslahah. Corruption will be prosecuted. That is what we need in this country. If we are to get the change that the people need, we have to be very strict about these things. But you see, there won't be any excuse for public officers. I trust them. I have worked with some of them. I have interacted with some of them. Those that are corrupt, at least some of them are just succumbing to some terrible circumstances that they find themselves in. They have no choice. Well, now, in the presidency that we lead, we will give them a choice. If they are paid well, they won't have any reason to. But if they do, we will go after them. So we are saying to government officers, you don't have to worry. You don't have to be scared. We are helping you to be what you want to be, which is being straight and honest and diligent public servants who serve your country well, and we would help you to do that. We would try to revive the economy. It is now in slumber, and we would create a functional, participatory, and efficient economy for our times, based on sustainable growth and macroeconomic stability. We will eliminate waste and introduce cutbacks in government spending, privatization of state-owned enterprises, increase foreign trade, and remove barriers to trade, liberalization of interests and exchange. We would also elevate the educational standards in this country. I have always said that we don't provide the Gambians with the education that they need for the development of this country. So we would improve the quality and relevance of education in the Gambia by strengthening national capacity to address challenges of teaching and learning, including teacher-related challenges. We've introduced access to early childhood education and development programs, especially for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, to help reduce educational inequality and to ensure that all children begin formal schooling on a strong foundation. You know, maths is a big problem in this country. It's just because that kids are not exposed very early to numeracy, and we will change that. For many of you, coming here today must have been very difficult, because there are no roads in this country. The few that are in very poor state. We would put in place appropriate infrastructure in this country. So we would have an infrastructure transformation. A recent World Bank study found that the poor state of infrastructure in many African countries, including the Gambia, reduced national economic growth by 2 percentage points every year and cut business productivity by as much as 40%, making Africa, in spite of its enormous mineral and natural resources, the region with the lowest productivity levels in the world. We will create a network of infrastructure to help move Gambia into the 21st century and boost our country's economic growth. Recently, we have seen roadworks or excavations that are leading to roadworks to commence. This could have started 4 years ago. I don't know what we've been waiting. This is 4 years late. This is 4 years late. In a government led by Team Essa Mbaye Faal, we would work very hard to ensure a quick transformation of the infrastructure of this country. The roads are in a palpable state, in an embarrassing state. We have to do something about it. This is one country, one road. From Banjul to Koina, it's one road. We have to change that. The biggest demography in this country is the forgotten people. That is the youth. The youth who are aged 13 to 30 years represents 37% of the population. If you take it to 40 to 45, it's about 65% of the population. So they hold the key to Gambia's economic, political, and social transformation. If we are to become a middle-income country, this is the demography with the strength, the power, and the stamina to transform this country. If we neglect them, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. In fact, we are saying to the person who should give you a helping hand and take you higher up, you say then, no, you just stand aside. You're not to be counted. That is what we do. I am saying that in a presidency led by Team Essa Mbaye Faal, the youth would be in the front, in the center, and at the back of everything that we do in this country. They would be the engine of growth and the vehicle for the transformation of this country. So all programs in this country would be youth-centered and youth-driven. We would ensure youth representation in cabinet. We would ensure youth representation in parliament. We would ensure youth representation in every sector of the economy. We would ensure that the youth play a huge role in the decision-making for their future, in the decision-making for this country. Our commitment is to systematically transform our young people into active, dedicated, patriotic, and productive citizens. You see, if you don't, you wouldn't love your country if your country doesn't do anything for you. We want to change that. We want to change that. We want to create a situation where the youth are obligated and indebted to this country and would therefore love nothing more than paying back to their country. So the youth would be in the center and front, in the middle of everything that we do. The transformation of this country cannot take place without a transformation of the agricultural sector. Recently, I visited Jahali Pacha, and to my utter dismay, it is led to follow into what may eventually be a wild forest if we do not take the necessary step to also turn that one around. I was there to hear the cries of the women whose only livelihoods come from those fields. I was there to see how neglected that place is, crying out loud for a visit from the government which has refused to set foot there for the last 5 years. This place could be the breadbasket of this country. I do say that we have a palace and we decide to put aside that palace and rent a hut and pay a very high price for that hut. What do I mean by that? We have Jahali Pacha and can produce enough rice to feed this country. We decide to neglect it to buy 4-grade rice from Vietnam or some Asian country. What a shame. We could turn this around. And we promise, we strongly believe that the Gambia has the capacity and potential to feed its population and become a net exporter of rice and other agricultural produce. The programs outlined in our manifesto will enhance our existing agricultural production potentials to ensure increased food production availability, access, and for export by implementing food sovereignty policies to ensure food self-sufficiency for our people. You see, I believe that a country that cannot feed itself is a country that is doomed. Our policies are aimed at ensuring food sovereignty. I like that term. It's a beautiful term. It's a beautiful term. Food sovereignty. It's another beautiful, a romantic definition of self-sufficiency. Thank you, guys. I learned something new, you know. You guys have done very well. Our healthcare system, or lack of it, I say all lack of it, advisable, because for a lot of people it doesn't exist. For a person needing dialysis, for a woman needing a mammogram machine, our healthcare system does not exist. It exists for some in Senegal. We have to change this. I have just said, instead of spending $1 billion each on a personal enterprise, it's more politically advised to spend that building hospitals and catering for the welfare of the Gambian people. I think that would make better politics. And Essa Mbaye Faal presidency promises to improve the quality of life of every Gambian by providing access to quality healthcare services in safe health facilities. I underline that, in safe health facilities, with the primary focus on preventive care instead of emergency care. You know, growing up as kids, we are taught, better safe than sorry. I'm sure all of you know that adage. Huh? Wow. Hor mogen kamach, muito gen de. Fagaro gen fadi. I think these are words of wisdom that can also advise us in our national politics and also in our governance. If we apply that in the health sector, I think we can focus on preventive care instead of emergency care. In addition, we can improve the overall health of the public by running awareness campaigns and introduce testing camps in remote areas, thereby reduce patient load and provide vital health awareness. You know what? The patient load is a big problem in this country. I understand, I have seen pictures recently of people lying on the floor at the main hospital in Banjo. That is a shame. That is really a shame. We should do something about it. So we would do something to revive the health sector. And amongst the policies really, one should also think of is to establish medical insurance. to ensure that at least there are greater facilities and greater care for the people. Information and communication technology. You know, the kids of today will talk mainly about megabytes. They talk mainly about browsing. They talk mainly about FaceTime and WhatsApp. And this is important because our lives nowadays revolve around this. You see, when you drive around the country, you have those pockets or black holes where you cannot communicate. It's all because of the rudimentary facilities we have in our information and communication technology sector. We are doing well, but we can do better. So we would invest in key ICT initiatives to position Gambia for the economy of tomorrow, not the economy of today, for the economy of tomorrow. A technology hub that will create a solid, uninterrupted, and cost-efficient ICT service to empower the Gambian people with access to information, job search opportunities, and services that improve their standard of living. I think we can do this. I think we can do this. I have said that the women of this country have suffered from the inequities of the past, discrimination, and certain traditional practices. We should recognize and enhance women's socio-economic and political participation and contribution in national development. Investing in women's empowerment set a direct path towards gender equality, poverty eradication, and inclusive economic growth. Women make significant contributions to our economy in businesses and farms as entrepreneurs or employees, or by doing unpaid care at home. So we would put in place policies that would significantly empower women. One of the policies I had previously outlined is to ensure a 50% cabinet positions for women. That way, the women would not be so disadvantaged in cabinet. But there are other interventions, some of which I can mention, like improve access and representation in executive and legislative bodies of the state, improve access and quality of women's physical and mental health through quality services. You know, I always give this example. There is no mammogram machine in this country. It's a big disgrace. We are living in the 21st century. We should ensure that these facilities exist for the women of this country. We have listed the key deliverables that we hope to achieve on the issue of and security sector of the citizenry of this country and restore the dignity in serving the nation, whilst promoting the best and brightest to join and serve. Respect for the rule of law and for human rights, accountability, transparency, and commitment to democratic ideal values are a must necessary of the reform process. There are some key issues here to encourage our best and brightest to join. I recall growing up, we used to say that in depot, education no matter. that mantra still seems to exist in our security forces. But it is changing. The other day I went to the police and it was quite refreshing to see many very young and highly educated young people. We should encourage this. And all changes in the security sector should include encouraging the Gambia's best and brightest in Germany. And in ensuring our security sector reform, we should responsibly end economic mission in the Gambia within 6 months of taking over. I do believe we can even do it in 3 months. We should train Gambian security forces with trades and other academic specialties to prepare them for jobs. We can transform our army into a professional corps of people with skills and professions who also serve their country. They could be the builders of this country. They could be the people building the roads and bridges of this country. They could be the people building the schools and the hospitals of this country. And they would proudly do so. So a security sector reform should include empowering these people to become professional tradesmen, people who can really benefit themselves with their trades after they leave the forces. I think it behoves us to help them to be skilled so that they can transition from serving personnel to professional people when they leave it. We can do it. We have also included public service reform, wherein the public service system, which is believed to be bloated and inefficient in many ways, it offers a salary that is barely adequate for the average Gambian household. It's demotivating to the workforce. It does not hold its employees accountable for resources. In a nutshell, it is not fit for purpose. So we promise to implement measures that would enforce, that would witness a fundamental transformation of the dysfunction and the lack of oversight in these services. Growing up, we used to hear that Gambia's civil service, just like our Gamtel, was number 2, or we're number 2 in Africa. Well, we are now number 9 in view of the Forbes magazine report that Gambia is now second to last in the world, worst for doing business. So it means, therefore, that our public service is also equally bad. We could transform this. If Gambians could have been the second best civil servants in Africa, we can now become best in Africa, because we are now more educated, we are now smarter, we are now more open-eyed, we are now better at everything than our forebears. So we should be able to do it. So I am excited, especially when I look around and see all these young people, smart, bright, and committed to taking Gambia to the next level. So with good public service reform, we would see a lot of young people occupying very senior positions in the public service. It is doable, and we promise that we will deliver on that. Our diaspora engagement. The diaspora is now bringing into Gambia, at least in 2020, $578 million. That is 48% of our GDP. That is almost 1/2 of what Gambia makes comes from the diaspora. This is a very significant and important demographic that we should embrace fully, encourage, and assist and support to continue to do well and even better for this country and for themselves. So the single most productive sector of the national economy is the diaspora. And the continuing importance of the diaspora in many other sectors, including household economies, helps to offset the sluggish performance in key sectors of the national economy. You know what? In many households, if money does not come from the diaspora, at the end of the month, it spells disaster. We all know it. That just shows their significance. Despite this important contribution, the Gambian diaspora remains politically marginalized. As we have seen, today they have been denied the right to participate in decision making, including the right to vote in this upcoming election. What a shame. But you know what I tell you, don't be discouraged. All those of you who are in the diaspora watching, we promise that our policies would be very diaspora friendly. Because by being diaspora friendly, we are being Gambia friendly. And by being Gambia friendly, we are helping the development of this country. Be rest assured that in a presidency of Essa Mbaye Faal, we would show such importance of the Gambian diaspora by symbolically relocating the Gambia Diaspora Directorate to the office of the President, taking it from Ministry of Foreign Affairs and taking it to office of the President, just showing its significance, its importance, because this has to form part of the day-to-day policy considerations of the government. Look, if you disregard 48% of GDP, I think you're sitting yourself in the foot. This is far too important to be marginalized. It is far too important not to be embraced and given the regard that it requires. You know, one big problem for the diaspora is the fees that are paid to transfer money to Gambia. We would work on reducing them, reduce the transaction cost for remittances. We would enfranchise the Gambian diaspora by making it possible for them to vote in national elections. We would facilitate secular migration arrangements. But for that to also happen, we have to really train people. So get them the necessary skills to be able to go abroad, work seasonally, and come back. You know, and a lot of things are possible. Just imagine if we invest money in our medical school and train a lot of nurses and a lot of doctors, and these people are able to go work abroad 6 months and come back and work 6 months in Gambia. Look, pretty soon we will have a lot of millionaires. That's why I also say we should invest in sports. Create lots of football fields, get them up to standard. We will soon produce a lot of professional footballers, and pretty soon we will increase the number of millionaires in Gambia. These things are important. This is how you transform a country. But it would be meaningless if we do all the things that are needed for the economic transformation of our country, but we neglect the environment as we currently do. We have to take this very seriously. We have to protect our environment because that is preserving or protecting the future. And the most pressing challenge facing us as human beings, as a species, is the climate crisis. We are the first generation to experiment, or to experience rather, the full brunt of the climate crisis, and the last generation to do something about it. Against this backdrop, the turnaround movement come into being to formulate policies that would help mitigate environmental crisis. We would review our current National Environment Protection Acts to safeguard and restore our environment. We have listed lots of policy interventions that could help to enhance and protect the environment in this country. But one key point I want to emphasize is the importance of enforcing our laws that seek to protect the environment. Just a few weeks ago, a very important bat sanctuary was sold or given to the Chinese for some hotel development. I understand that some 650 species of birds fly to that place as their sanctuary. That should be protected and not jettisoned to predatory businesses that know no better than to come and desecrate your environment, take the profits, and run away to foreign countries. We should not allow it. Thanks to Ahmad and Co. for standing firm and not accepting that. The presidency led by us would give due regard to the protection of our environment. You see, Gambia is very small. This is the only place we have. If it becomes so hot that it is unbearable, we have nowhere to run to. See? So we have to do something about it. And you know what? A good chunk of the population of this country depend on tourism for employment. If we desecrate our environment, well, the tourists would not come here. And we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot. We have to do everything possible to protect our environment. And you know, Gambia is famous for one important thing, the Banjul Declaration. We should hold firm to that. It is very important. We have a copy of the blueprint. We will share it with journalists. And we believe that this can help galvanize and spur a swift economic transformation for this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that is all of us, and we want to thank you again for taking time to come to this conference of preparation. We will take 5 questions from the media. As you can see, we have other engagements, and we have other media engagements there in the evening. So your name, media house, and if you have 1 or 2 things to ask, then we will accept only 5. Then we will call it a day. Name, media house, or are we clear? Is this clear enough? We don't have any questions. Yeah. You must come from the media house, yes.
Young the Gambia College, the student are complaining because when this conference we introduce payment. these are the things that the staff.